Can you tell us a little bit about the key takeaways you think everyone should have from your keynote now that we're sort of wrapping up the conference?
Well, I think that the main thing is that we need to move from the problem space to the solution space. So we spent enormous amounts of resources, time, to study problems to death, and that doesn't necessarily lead to innovation or solutions. So by shifting the way we think about problems into the solution space, we can end up with win-wins that are good for business, they're good for the environment, and that requires different types of collaboration, it requires different types of education, and just a different way of approaching problems than the way we've traditionally done it.
That's a great point. And since we're coming from the education space, can you tell us what you think about the kind of ideal education configuration or educational approach we need for the future?
Yep, I think the way we've typically trained people, I'm trained in health sciences, so I was trained to study how bad everything is. Though I did get, part of my training was in pollution prevention, so I did focus on solutions. Typical chemists or engineers focused on, studying solutions, but not really thinking about the environment, health, safety. So your typical chemist will go through a 4-year program or even a PhD and never have a class in toxicology or life cycle, and that's not ingrained into their thinking. So we've created these artificial walls in academia where we don't talk to each other. I mean, I'll give you an example of, my colleagues at Amherst, the chemical engineering department is on the same hall as the environmental health sciences with some of the leading toxicologists in the world in that, and they'd never spoken to each other until I came and said, you need to talk to your friends down the hall because actually they're doing stuff that's really useful for you and vice versa. So they hadn't, and I've learned this through many years of fighting with our plastics engineering faculty 20 years ago, and they hated me, and now it's a very good relationship where we realize they need us and we need them. So
collaboration, right?
It's collaboration, but it's not the way we typically do things in academia. We create silos because we have our disciplines and we don't create interdisciplinary programs that solve problems. So
Exactly. In that space, I think academia probably has a lot to learn from industry.
Right, of course, because in industry, those tend to be integrated functions. The health, safety, environment often goes along with product design, except product designers may not have any health, safety, and environment training, so how do you get those folks? What we're finding, at least in our GC3 members, is they're saying, all things equal, we'd love to have a chemist that has toxicology, life cycle, policy training because they're much more valuable. We don't have to train them then.
Right.
How do you see the younger generation sort of influencing the push towards a more environmentally, more health-conscious product?
So I think that they're the purchasers of the future. So retailers, for example, worry about customer preferences. So a Target worries about what their customers think or their guests. So if their guests are raising concern about chemicals in the products they're putting on their kids' bodies, they're going to do something about it. So that's what their metric is. If our guests, our customers are worried about what we're putting on the shelves, we lose their confidence, we lose their vote. So one of the great examples we worked with early on was Boots in the UK, the corner pharmacy. They're now selling at Target, but they essentially said when they were starting to look at their chemical strategies, they went out to their stakeholders, their customers, and said, what are you worried about? And rather than saying, we need to educate you on why everything we make is safe, they said, our customers have these concerns and we need to do, whether we agree or disagree, we need to do something about it because ultimately we exist because of them.
It's very smart.
So,
Yep.
So it's a different strategy, but I think it comes down to just making sure students have education that and advocacy of students. So for example, at the University of Toronto, the faculty were sort of against green chemistry until the students organized and said, no, we want this. And frankly, in a state university, the students are the customers, and so if the students are organizing saying we want this is what we need to have, we're going to follow suit. So
that's right.
So organizing students is really important. I mean, everything I do now is about the student, and so that's what students need to force us to be doing things differently as well.
Yeah. That's where it's at. Back to our point about this generation. Going back to what you were saying about the need for collaboration and interdisciplinarity and really essentially collective intelligence.
Right.
It reminds me of the cable program.
Yeah,
You know,
so-
but the premise of the cable program was exactly this, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So just developing the future leaders of the bioeconomy and getting them into getting them ready to fill the positions at these, big name companies that have the global reach.
Right.
So, one of the things that we do is really promote leadership training, because we know that can be applied to any field, and it should be. And we noticed a real need for leadership in the bioeconomy and in the world of product stewardship as well.
Well, and I think with the cable program, the whole premise was to build this leadership pipeline, and the mechanism for that pipeline is this network. And it's bringing together, weaving together, that's a cable idea.
Right.
Universities, industry, the general public, the public sector. And it's really interesting to see the advocacy for the bioeconomy that's emerged from both faculty and students who are engaging with the industrial sector. And I think that these students are just primed and ready to go, and they're advocates.
So do you feel the students are getting, so one of the areas I know there's been concerns about, and I've had talks with people in the sort of bioeconomy world or bio-based materials world, is there's a lot of focus on sustainable, but not necessarily safe. And as we know, some of the sort of the processes to derive some of those biomaterials use fairly nasty reagents and solvents, et cetera. So is that being brought into the training? I'll give you an example. One very upscale, won lots of accolades, bio-based materials company. I went in there and took a walk around their facility, and it's like, they had no health and safety program. So you had workers working with they were using a biologic agent, a live biologic agent in their process, and I was like, well, there was no respiratory protection, there was no EHS protocol, because they thought what they were doing is perfectly safe. They were engineering grads who had been trained in, chemical engineering, but they had no toxicity training, so they hadn't thought about that, right? They thought they were doing the right thing, but
that goes back to your point for needing the intersection and the collective intelligence and the working across sectors.
Yeah, we sort of have a great cross-disciplinary collaboration, because we've got undergrad students, grad students, from a whole range of disciplines, so everything from communications to hardcore chemical engineering. And so that sort of broad spectrum of disciplines really allows for a positive give and take from one another. They're constantly teaching each other and teaching our team new things that they're learning at their universities, and that can be applied to science everywhere.
So what they in the cable premise, I'm speaking as the external program evaluator,
right.
But the premise is that like if you have a 3-circle Venn diagram, one circle is their content area, which is really the purview of our university partners and faculty there, like yourself. Another circle is industry, and then the final circle is more of the partners from the public, the NGOs, the governmental agencies, national labs, things like that. But in the content is also coming. Let me see. So the industry. The technical knowledge is coming from that university space.
Right.
The cable administrators are bringing in this leadership component that sort of overlays all of that, so that they can apply these leadership skills. The cable program doesn't necessarily bring the content expertise, but they bring the university partners who source these students from their fields. So it's this big network that's working together and actually trying to work across these silos. It's been really interesting to witness.
Fascinating. And how integrated is this effort into overall university mission, and does the university see this as key to its mission?
Well, there's more than 20 universities, so you can imagine each university has its agenda, and that can change depending on administration and whatever programs are. But what we have is a sort of real faculty force from the representatives from all these universities who are trying to find ways to embed the cable program in different ways that are useful for their institutions and suit their institutional culture. But the other thing related to the sustainability is of this program, because it's USDA funded. So once that grant funding period ends, we'll try to spin it off into a sustainable model. And what's really emerging across all the universities and faculty and industry partners and students is this need for internships. So what we're looking at for the sustainability plan is really taking this thing we've built and using it as a way to give students this leadership training in these sectors, get their internships in ways that are tied to their academic careers, and maybe take away some of the kinks that happen with those kinds of internship experiences, sort of broker that in between space.
Yep.